Hello and welcome to this episode of the Wealth Alchemist Podcast. My name is Carrie Norley and I am your host. And today, this is such a long-awaited conversation with my beautiful, beautiful soul sister, dear, deeply, I love her to bits, soul sister, Lori Kinsey. And this actually started, well, we're going to talk today. Let me just say what we're talking about today, and then I'll introduce you to her. We are talking about financial abuse today. And it's a big conversation. Both of us are incredibly passionate about helping people to get out of abusive situations. And a few months ago, can you believe it, Lori? It was 5 months ago. 5 months ago. It's crazy. She and I worked together for Quantum Clear. So anyway, Lori, actually, I'll just say a little bit about Lori first, and I'll tell you how this all came to be. She is an incredible transformational rock star. She helps with leadership and people who are in conscious leadership roles to help you to really bloom and blossom into the best, most amazing, soul-aligned, heart-led leader that there could possibly be. She is a supporter. She is the biggest heart, and having worked with her personally, having worked with her professionally, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, she is one of the most amazing practitioners and one of the most supportive, incredibly loving human beings you will ever meet. So that's Lori. And we met in Spiral Prac. So for those of you who know me and you've been following me, you know I do emotional clearing work and through Spiral practitioner work, and we do Spiral. Lori and I met through Spiral, and the clear that we did that started this conversation. Actually, it was Lori's last year started really starting to get more into her passion of working with people of domestic violence. And when I went through my clear with her earlier this year, we actually cleared work with me around abuse and being the abuser, which is another conversation for maybe another day. I don't know if we want to go in there today, but I'm sure it'll come up. I'm sure it'll come up at some level in this conversation. And so from there, we started talking about all the different ways of abuse and how we can support other people in this. And so this conversation has been scheduled and rescheduled multiple times, but we are here today to tell the tale. And I'm really excited. And I hope that, this is probably going to be, I feel into this already. I was just saying to Lori, I'm coming up on like 50 episodes. I feel like this will probably be one of the most powerful episodes I do. So please grab a cup of tea, hang with us for a little while. We talk about something really important having to do with money. So welcome to the show, Miss Lori.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible introduction. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here. And I was blown away when you said almost the 50th episode. Like that just blows my mind as this has been going on for so long. And I've literally watched you bloom and grow and cultivate this podcast. And I'm so proud of you. I'm honored to be here, and I'm so proud of you. And this is going to be a very powerful conversation. And I do hope that everybody actually stays for the entire time, because who knows where this is going to go.
Absolutely.
So many layers.
Can you actually share a little bit about your background within the domestic violence area as well? Because I know this is not your first rodeo as we have this conversation.
Yeah, no, happy to. I actually experienced domestic violence. I experienced domestic violence for 11 years. I was in a marriage for 11 years. And the crazy part is I didn't quite realize exactly how deep the violence went and the abuse went until I found myself in a shelter, actually supporting somebody else. It was a domestic violence shelter. And I was supporting somebody else. And I told her, well, I'll go too. I've never gone before. And I had the clipboard in my hand, and I was checking off all the boxes but one when it said, what has happened to you in the last 48 hours? And the only box I didn't check was surviving attempted homicide at that point. And so that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I have experienced quite a bit here. And I need to go and look into this deeper. So, being a spiral practitioner actually brought so much of the unconscious into the conscious, because I did not even realize, let's go back to the first marriage for a moment. My children were actually kidnapped from me. And in that moment in time, I still did not realize I was in an abusive relationship. And I sure as hell didn't know I was in a violent, a domestically violent abusive relationship.
Because there's difference. There's difference.
There is a difference. Yeah. So
it's so common too, by the way, you know, like I've never shared this part of my stuff either. Like we talked a little bit in the episode that I did with Danielle around psychedelics, which is in the episodes around 20. You guys can go listen to that, where I talked about Bobinsano, which is actually what was going on when Lori and I started doing, I had just finished my Bobinsano sessions or a few weeks working with it, when Lori and I started working on my quantum clear around the abuser. Excuse me. And so I talk a little bit about there, but for me, one of the things that I found really fascinating, and I share this because of what you said, when I was in college, and I still don't know why they let me, like I was not in a psych degree in college or anything like that. I was studying early childhood education, but I started working at a domestic violence shelter, and I was doing phone calls and intakes. And I still, like I said, I don't know why, like some really unqualified, I guess they just needed a bum in a seat to talk to somebody. Right. And I can remember, so like you do get training in the abuse cycle and all this kind of stuff. And I intook people, I got on calls, I did the whole thing. When I was in the emotionally abusive relationship that I talked about on the show, it was amazing to me that even when I could see it took me a long time to see it. But even when I could see it, it still does not make it easy to get out.
No.
Still does not make it easy to get out. So for those of you who are here and listening, we're going to start to talk. We're going to drop into a lot of this and like what this is and how, and we'll give you some tips about how you can get out and what you can do about this kind of stuff. Because wherever you are right now, if this is the first moment of awareness that you even have a problem, like celebrate that and also love yourself. You know, like don't shame yourself more. Defeats the whole purpose of all of this, right? We're already shaming ourselves enough that we're here doing these things, whatever we're doing. Just honor yourself for where you are. Love on yourself for where you are. Be willing if you need to, like I'm going to say right here, right now, like reach out to one of us if there's something that one of us can do to support you, to help you, to put you in the right direction. And make sure that you're safe and just love on yourself through this process. Love on yourself as you listen to this conversation, because it could be an eye opener for a lot of things that you're like, I didn't even realize that was going on. And it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. So one of the things you mentioned, and today what I really want to drop into, and Lori and I probably will have another conversation about abuse in a different way, but today I want to talk about financial abuse specifically. And so, which is like we said, there's different layers and different levels of abuse. So some people can have a physical abuse, but not have financial abuse. Some people can have financial abuse and not have physical abuse. So can you explain a little bit, like what is financial abuse?
Yes, I'd love to touch on that real quick. Do you mind if I share something on that
Please.
cycle of abuse?
Yes,
and
please.
Really easy, because a lot of people do not, I feel like this is going to shine a light and bring a lot of awareness to different people. And there is the cycle of abuse. So we have usually the offender has been a victim and the victim has been an offender, and it kind of has this cycle of abuse. And so really bringing also awareness to your actions and also being gentle with yourself on that as well, and going, because there might be some aha moments that end up happening here where you're like, oh, this is what I'm doing to somebody else. Not only has it been done to me, but it's also something that I might be doing to somebody else and not even realizing it. And that's the piece that I'd really like to have a lot of compassion, just like what you said. Love on yourself, be gentle on yourself, no shaming, no nothing. This is just a conversation to bring awareness and to shine a light on what financial abuse is. So on that note, so financial abuse is basically when somebody is preventing somebody else from leaving a situation by taking control of the finances or to maintain power in a relationship. And it actually is a lot common in physically abusive relationships, and also with elderly abuse too. So this is when they are taking control of finances, of money, they're withholding it or concealing information. So this can, like I said, this is layers. There's a lot of things to this. There's a lot of, would you like me to describe how it happened to me?
Yes. Yeah.
Because I've experienced all of the things, not even realizing I was experiencing all the things. when it comes to any kind of abuse, it all happens very subtly, like very subtly and very gradual. And with financial abuse, especially, this becomes really subtle. And what happens a lot of times is that either your partner, regardless of its partner, husband, whoever it is,
because it goes both ways.
Yeah, it goes both ways. They they will say, hey, I'll take control of the finances. You don't have to do that. That's just, let me take something off your plate. Let me take control of the finances. Or in my case, because this was something, another thing I'd like to say is that abuse happens in I would say most households at this point, right? And it's all cultures, it's all classes, it's all
races, religions, all walks of life.
All the walks of life, all of it. So for me in particular, with my situation, I've always been a very career-driven person, successful person, on the outside, a very strong, independent woman, a great mother, all of those things. And so with me, what happened is I actually had control of the finances. And so what happened is we had a joint account. And I would, like I said, I was career driven from a very young age, from the very beginning. He was always, always supportive of my career. He also had a career. But what happened was we paid all the bills out of our joint account. Mine was always direct deposit. My checks always went in. All my finances always went in, where gradually, more and more gradually, he was getting paid in cash. He was getting paid in cash, or he would go and cash the checks because he would say, well, we need cash on hand, so we'll just put all of your paychecks. So this is over gradual, over a few years. We just literally paid, we survived off of my paychecks. And then he actually had cash. Yeah, he had cash. He had cash and I didn't have access to that cash. He would make me think I had access to the cash. Like it would be in direct deposit boxes. He actually was a prepper as well. That's another thing, like you never know. And so he was always like putting it in different places in the home or whatever it was, but I never had access to the cash, basically. So that's actually how it happened with me. Would you like me to explain my experience with the financial abuse?
Yeah.
Okay, so what ends up happening? So that happens. He also ends up going later on in life, traveling to the Caribbean. He was actually building resorts there, and he was getting paid in cash there as well. And he would start to punish me by not sending money. He never sent money. That's the other thing. He never sent money over, but he also would use that as a punishment. And the punishment would actually be if I was out with, there's a lot of isolation that begins to happen with abuse. So if I was out with family or friends or something like that, then he would say, oh, he'd get upset. I'm not there. I'm not sending money. So then he would put us into this financial situation. So that would happen. Cut me off if I start to just go into this thing. But basically my whole entire story was that actually gave me fuel. That gave me fuel and empowered me because I did have the finance. I was in a career where I did have financial control. And I started realizing, oh my gosh, I can do this on my own because he was already withholding. So I was like, okay, I can do this on my own. And then that gave me the fuel and the fire to actually have the encouragement and the courage to leave and be safe and secure and leave. So when that happened, though, he had gone and he had an idea what was going to happen. And he had actually gone and cleaned out all of the accounts because we were joint account. So he cleaned out all of the accounts, anything that I had access to, and had done that like a month before I had ever actually said, yes, this is what I am doing. So a lot of times these are the things that happen. So when you're saying, how do we start to spot when we're in these situations? I have a list here because I feel like already there's some aha moments probably popping off with a few people.
Yeah, I want to say as well, because I'll speak my experience. I know, and I've never spoken about this live. But I know for me, my family, growing up in my family, I've had a trust fund since 1983 is when it was set up for me. And if I ever ask about it for until like a couple years ago when I needed to make a will, I was like, how dare you ask about that? And I'm like, I'm almost like, I was old enough that I needed to plan things and what's going to happen when, and I'm talking to financial planners and all these things. And they wouldn't let me. If I asked about it, I was just like, you're a terrible person for God forbid asking. And I say that because it can show up many places. It's not just in an intimate relationship. Right. Yeah. And then it taught me, like, if I ask about money, then I'm going to get yelled at, or I'm a bad person for wanting to know or for wanting to plan. And it showed up. Like, I mean, they did I don't want to get into publicly too much about it, but like my family's done some pretty nasty things in regards to the way they have manipulated and hidden and gotten me to sign documents without telling me what they were. This is another thing that people will do, right? I'm just saying, like, as we're talking about these types of things, that's the kind of situations I got into, that I was like, and it was years later, again, because I needed to get these things for the will, that I was like, oh my God, you guys made me sign this document 6 years ago. Why the hell did you make me sign this?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't tell me when I asked you what it was. They're like, oh, I don't know. They just want you to sign it. And I'm like, you freaking knew what this was. You probably put this together.
Yes.
Right. And they can be manipulative behind your back and all that kind of stuff. And it's, you don't even realize it's happening. Like, I had no idea. I just thought, it's for the best of me. Okay. Because that's what I was told. We're just taking care of you. We're just looking after you. And I was like, you did some pretty nasty things, actually.
Yes, on all these things. It does. It happens within families. It happens within the cultures of the family. It depends, if you have money, if you don't have money. There's even, here's an example that I found myself in as well. It wasn't even with even my ex-husband. It was actually with my ex-father-in-law. So it even but I also was coerced into signing documents on some land, on some land that I actually, whenever I ended up divorced, I didn't have access to that, yet I was on all the financial debt.
Right. And then you end up responsible.
Yes.
And if debt happens and all these things, you end up responsible because your name's on it. And then they can actually default on all sorts of things and end up on you. It's a big problem. Credit cards, I see it happen with.
Yes.
Wait, okay, go. I'm sure you have this all listed. Right, go. Yeah. So where do we're like jumping ahead. Okay, so where do you've got your list. Tell us on your list.
I do. I have my list because there's so many layers here, and it's one of the things, that people don't quite understand is there's a lot of times when you're not allowed to have a job. Like that's another thing, you're just not, and I don't want to say you're not allowed, but it comes across as in, we're fine. I am a supporter of the family. I don't need, we don't need the extra income, whatever it is, but that is the quickest way to get somebody to stay. Right? To stay is just full on cutting them off.
I was going to say, I think something that we didn't actually say when we started to get into this is that I think financial abuse can be used as like a secondary form almost, right, to get people to stay. And it's not necessarily the first thing that will happen within an intimate relationship of abuse. It might be that thing that's like, well, now she can't leave. She's screwed.
Yeah. And this is actually even the case so there was something that I learned just the other day, that it usually takes someone 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. 7 times.
I believe
the number one reason is finances.
Absolutely.
The number one reason why they don't leave is because of the finances. So, whenever you have a partner that's wanting you to stay, or even, we can even talk about this with parent-child relationships, anything, it really doesn't matter, any kind of relationship. They make it where it's almost impossible to have a job, or they'll actually even stalk you at your place of work or your place of business or even call in. My ex-husband used to do that for me. He'd call, for me. He said it was for me, but he would call in and get me almost fired all the time. He actually would come. There was actually a red flag where he could not be on the property of my work because he would come and create problems at work to get me fired, like just to cause a problem. So there's actually a lot of people that do this. So let's say you're not in an abusive relationship, also have the awareness of your coworkers. And if you're seeing this type of behavior even happening from their partners, of them coming to the workplace and creating scenes and creating drama and constantly this is another tactic of financial abuse. We already spoke about access to accounts or keeping or hiding assets, but I can't tell you how many times I don't know how many accounts my ex-husband had, but I'm sure he had a lot to keep all of that cash in. And here's another thing. We were actually in a small town. And so whenever I did open up my own accounts, he cleaned those out as well. Yeah, because we were in a small town and they were like, hey, this is my wife. These are her accounts. Can I It's fine. It's fine. She's okay with this. And then they did that. So then there was a red flag on my account so that they had to call me anytime, or I had to have ID or something like that anytime that I wanted to open an account or do any kind of credit, just like what you said, opening credit cards under a spouse's account or joint credit cards, and then,
racking it all up and leaving it to them. I hear it all the time. I mean, it's not one of the things I've had so far, but it's not pretty.
Right. It's not pretty because then they destroy your credit and then you have to go into credit recovery. That's another thing, with leaving and being able to get out on your own. You have to have credit to be able to have housing, anything like that. So that's big. This is one that's pretty subtle and this is part of what happens in the beginning. They are constantly questioning you over your purchases. Constantly asking you, why did you spend $105 on groceries? Constantly saying you only have $50 to spend on groceries when the list that they have or they've asked you to purchase is like $200. And then they gaslight you whenever you get home, or you have to show them receipts. Anything like that where they're constantly wanting proof of things or gaslighting you about your purchases. That's pretty big.
What does gaslighting about purchases mean?
Pretty much saying there's no way why is this $200 grocery bill? You only have $50 worth of stuff there. And a lot of times they're clueless. Because
they've never been to the grocery store.
Exactly. They've never been to the grocery store. They don't know how much things cost, even though they're demanding a receipt and then they're checking off the receipt. So that actually happens in the beginning. It's pretty subtle. Making financial decisions without you. That's another big one. Anytime they're going and making big purchases, or they are opening accounts or getting loans, that's another thing. Opening credit lines. We've already talked about that. Selling property that is yours.
Ooh.
That's a big one. Like how many times I'll actually talk about this. So I had to just think about an example of this happening, because this is a cycle, right? So in my childhood, my stepfather actually sold a lot of my father's possessions. Like he had cameras and electronics and things like that. My father passed away and then my stepfather came in. And so he was actually financially abusing my mother by selling her prized possessions.
Oh,
yeah. So that's another one, because I've gone deep into all of this.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, right? Because then it leaves you, first of all, like, again, alone, more alienated, but also like if you wanted to leave, I have these few things I could sell to make some cash for myself. And so they take that away too.
They will take that away. They will either take it and hide it, or they will go and actually sell it and keep the money. This has not happened to me yet, but filing false insurance claims with your name I've actually heard of that happening quite a bit. And then it coming on you, and then you're stuck with all the responsibility and the fraudulent charges or anything else that happens. Not paying child support.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm, that is a huge one. And then forcing to open lines of credit. So not even just the doing that in secret, but also now forcing you to do that and then racking all that up too. So that's just a few.
There's a lot there. There's a lot. And I just want to take a moment and have a breath with that, because if you're listening, like, which one of these is resonating with you? Which one of these have you experienced in the past? Because if you're this far, you've probably, I'm guessing, right? There's probably some part of you that's experienced. I have dings going off and I tried to stop them. I don't know where they are. Sorry, guys. Oh, you can't hear them? Okay, good. No. As long as you can't hear them. So yeah. So anyway, it's like, it's a really interesting, what was I just saying? Go after I got distracted just from dings.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. So if you are hearing this, and this is the first time that you're actually like having recognition of the fact that there is something that's not sitting 100% with you in the way that your finances are being managed between you and your partner, or you and a family member, your kids, paying attention. Remember, like, it's so easy. And we started this, and it's, we started this conversation, and I said to you, I looked at myself as the abused and the abuser, right? And it's really challenging as somebody who has spent most of our lives. Lori and I both can say we have been through cycles of abuse within different relationships for most of our lives at some point. Not most, because both of us are thankfully coming out of that at the moment, right? But thankfully,
yes.
But for a lot of our lives, we did. And it's easy to blame. It's easy to blame, and even to hear this and blame other people. And at some level, we get to take responsibility as well, even though that's a freaking hard pill to swallow sometimes. And at some point, we also get to realize I can be the abuser too. And I can hear some of these things and I'm like, ooh, I kind of have done that little piece with my husband. And it's never been like, so bank accounts, like I have multiple, he calls me, my mom, my husband, I'm a squirrel. Like I have multiple bank accounts for different things, different reasons. And it's never that I've hidden them from him, because I don't, but he forgets where things are, or he doesn't. Right. And so I'm not, it's not like a full abuse thing, but I can sit here and go, well, and in these last months, since we've been doing more crypto work, like we have everything documented very well. So like that's not in existence because it's documented very well, but I'm sure there's probably still random things here and there that he doesn't know about. Not because I am like trying to hide from him, but if I look at it from this perspective, could I be more like transparent about things? Yeah. Do I do it from an abuse perspective? No, it's just because I'm a squirrel.
Right. It's all about intention.
Right.
But take a look at the pattern, right?
Right.
Take a look at the pattern. And that's what I love. I love that you're opening this up to this part of the conversation, because this is the part that is so hard to hear, especially once you have realized and understood that you've been in a domestic violence. And I say domestic violence because honestly, here in the state of Utah in the United States, I have several, like I have family members and several friends that are in law enforcement. And whenever I started to go down this route, I wanted to ask them, like, what is the difference between domestic violence and domestic abuse? And they said nothing. We call it domestic violence. It's all domestic violence. All criminal charges, all everything is domestic violence. And that is the biggest piece. I'm kind of going into a few things here real quick. That's the biggest piece. This is why I thought I was not in an abusive relationship, because I wasn't having marks on my body where people could see. I was in a very violent relationship, but I wasn't what you see on the billboards. I wasn't what you see,
bruised,
the black eyes, all of that. I had bruises on every other part of my body. And I have the most, I have horrific stories to tell, but I still didn't think that I was being abused because I didn't look like what society tends to think of what an abusive, what an abused person looks like. So, and also even just my household, all of those things. So I wanted to actually clarify that, and then also clarify law enforcement and the law, there is no difference between domestic violence and domestic abuse.
I want to give you a quick message before hopping back into this episode. Wealth Codes is here. I am so excited to be bringing this program to the world. If you have had enough of your limited glass ceilings that you have placed on yourself and your financial reality, and you are ready to shift your relationship with money and wealth into a beautiful, abundant one, this program is for you. I have created a space to dive deep and explore all the facets that are holding you back from bringing in your next level of financial abundance. There are plenty of money mindset programs out there, but they will only get you so far if you are only focusing on your mindset. You are a multidimensional being, so this program looks at all aspects of you and helps you shift your financial reality from a mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, and physical space. We have content clearing and activation sessions each month to help you clear the stuff keeping you from living your wildest dreams. If you are ready for a next level wealth reprogramming experience, join me in this program. Head on over to carrienorley.com/wealth codes to get more information. I am so excited to see you on the inside of this program and witness you as you create your dreams.
But when we start to look into, so this is the spiral practitioner coming out in Carrie and I, when we start to look at the abusive cycle, and this was what was so beautiful in our work together was, and I did the same, was looking at the accountability here because the victim does become the abuser becomes the victim, that type of thing happens. So when I was going through my first spiral journey, that's exactly what I was looking at. And I was looking at where have I been at? Because I left because I wanted to break the cycle of abuse. I had 2 young children. I wanted to break the cycle of abuse because yes, my ex-husband had been abused. His father had been abused. There was a history of generational and ancestral abuse there. But then it was, okay,
All right. We had a little technical glitch. We are back. So if this is a little bit confusing, go on, Miss Lori. Where were you? You were talking about generational abuse.
Okay. All right. So if we're talking about the cycle and the generational and ancestral abuse, or the cycles of that, then you really do start to look at, as a spiral practitioner, and this is actually the work that Carrie and I were doing together, was as spiral practitioners, we kind of go, okay, so where am I doing this? If I was a victim of domestic violence in any way, now, if that cycle is true, I'm going to be, where am I abusing, right? Where am I turning into the offender and then creating, this cycle? Because it is a cycle. It's very textbook. This is a cycle. So then
actually, really quickly, we haven't actually said the actual, because you've talked about the offender to the victim, but like within the cycle of abuse, you haven't actually said, so like we have the honeymoon, we have, right? Can you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So that's like a whole nother.
Yeah, but just a little brief, this is the
like,
actual cycle. This is what it will look like. If you're in this,
yes,
you'll now have an awareness that you're in this and you
yes,
should pay attention to this right here.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So it is, again, this part is textbook again, and it's like, usually something's going to happen, right? Something's going to happen where all of a sudden it is your fault. There's something big has happened. There's a reaction.
An explosion usually.
What's that?
I said a big explosion usually.
A big explosion. Yes. Something big that has happened. And now, you're being blamed for anything and everything. It is not your fault. It is actually the other person, the offender's fault. In fact, there's a myth in domestic violence where people say that the offender actually has an anger management issue, but usually, more often than not, that is not the case, because they are able to manage their anger with their coworkers, at their work, with their family members, with their friends. In fact, most of the time with offenders, people don't believe this is happening. When it finally does come to the surface, people don't believe it because they're such a nice
They're such kind
person.
people and good
Yes.
citizens of society.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So just know that when these things happen, there's none of this has to do with you. But usually there's a big explosion, a lot of hurt feelings, things are said or broken or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, the cycle now goes into the honeymoon cycle, and this is actually why people get
Why they
caught
stay.
in these relationships. Yes, in these situations, because now we're going into the honeymoon cycle and you get the, oh, I am so sorry. I love you. I would never
And the
do this
gifts
again.
come. I didn't mean
Yes.
to. You're
The
amazing. You're
Mhm.
beautiful.
Yep. I love you more than anybody on this earth. Why would I hurt you? I'll never do this again. The I'm sorry flowers, the makeup sex. I mean, just all, and you're the best person in the world. Like everything. Yeah. The gifts, the compliments, everything. And here's another thing is that a lot of times this doesn't happen all the time, right? It's just that when it does happen, it's big. So sometimes people also don't think they're in an abusive relationship because this isn't happening.
It can be sly.
Yes.
That's what I have found too. Yeah. And then after that, so you have the explosion, the honeymoon, and then there's usually like a rest period, I would say, where it's kind of like, that's where you might see some of these sly financial abuse things, these other little things coming, but it's not like explosive. It's just kind of neutral. And the person who's being abused is often left feeling like walking on eggshells. What am I doing? Waiting for the next explosion. But one of the things I have definitely noticed is how it doesn't have to be an explosion, right? It can actually be these really sly little things that go and go and go. And it can be, unkind things said often. It can be, and then it can still be, oh, and here's the honeymoon, but I feel really bad. I wasn't saying nice things to you. I wasn't being nice to you. It doesn't have to be an explosion about it either. Like there's people who are really calm that would do that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh, let me do this for you. And I'll just take care of the house and I'll give you this and I'll do that. And they'll tell you something nice. And then there's again, the even keel. And it doesn't have to be like a big thing, but it's still abuse. It's still not okay. And like, I know for me and often, and like when we start to look at the abuser, right, when we start to own into this, oftentimes what would happen is I would take that out of my kids. Right. Like that's where as a woman we'll go to. Right. And I can remember, and I will say this. I don't know one mother that I have spoken to, God love us all, that has not turned on our children and screamed and done things that were like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that to my kid. Right. And I just say that to all mothers out there. You are not alone. You are a normal human being, but this is where it will show up often for a woman, right? Who's being abused from one way, is we turn and we do it to the children. And then we wonder why the children are doing it to each other or coming at us. Right. Yes. And I can remember the times that I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I don't even know where that came from, where that came over me. Right. And we have to be able to forgive ourselves for that. But that's where we can then turn into that cycle and turn it somewhere else. It doesn't make it okay. Like I have worked my rear end off. You and I both know that, to stop doing any of these patterns with my children, because this is where it breaks. Right. If I can stop that to my kids, then that opens doors for them to completely break these cycles. And the truth is, like, I really don't know anybody at this point in my life who has not been the abused and the abuser.
Right.
Whether they want to admit it or not. Right. Because this is what has been traditionally taught to us. And I think it's I love that we're having this conversation, because I think it's a really powerful time in the history of humanity that we're finally starting to see this and say, wait, I can do something different. I don't have to wail on my children. I don't have to be mean to my children. I don't have to control my kids, because that's often what's happening. I can't control them, so I'm going to hit them. Right. From a lot of people who do this, right? Like the parent that wants to, and that type of a thing. And it's just like where we have the ability now to have the awareness to stop and then to see again, like we can see this play out as patterns with our kids. Like, how am I teaching my children about money? right? Like, what am I teaching my children? And is it like a healthy relationship with money, or am I having some sort of a controlling abuse? And I can feel this with myself. Like, don't spend your money there. Right. Like that would be my comment to them. Like, it's like, that's such a waste of money. Right.
Yes.
But instead of judging them now, I'm learning and I'm asking, like, is that the best use of your money? Is that what you really want to do with it? Yes, mom. Okay. And because I have taught them things around investing, it can be like, okay, well, just think about it. If you left that money there growing, that would happen. Or you can make this decision here. And they're like, oh, okay, mom. And then they make an educated decision versus me controlling the situation, which as a parent, we definitely like to do sometimes, right?
Right.
But it starts like, we can really start to look at like how we show up for all of these things and start to break these cycles in every way, shape, and form everywhere right now.
I think it's really beautiful that you just brought that up about the patterns, because really pay attention to the patterns in your children. That's where you can see your pattern actually is in your children. If you have children, because this is what was happening with mine.
Right.
Mine are both very independent. I've also raised them to be very independent. So they are, but my children have had more money in the bank than I ever did, even as young kids. My son at 5 years old would have more money in the bank all the time in his savings account. And I look back at the patterns of the abuse, right? And the withholding, right? The withholding, and we don't have enough, even though we had enough, we also didn't have enough. There's something that also is to be said, just so I would like to bring this up too, because it doesn't, like I said, and you've talked about this, about having a trust fund. It's like you can be surrounded by wealth and not have access to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
people look to me all the time and like, what, you have I'm like, I can't touch it. It doesn't help me. Right. The amount of times like I've been surrounded and I understand the concept. When Lori and I met, I was breaking through a lot of this stuff that I was dealing with trust fund stuff, because people couldn't understand that. But you grew up in wealth. I'm like, I understand wealth from a level that most people would never understand and may never understand. And at the same time, I don't have access to it. It's not currently like all in my possession. And it's a really crazy dichotomy to live in when that is the experience of money, and it's been like, I still have to go and do my work and pay my bills and be a normal human being. Yes.
And you actually see that in a lot of the breakups, right? Like celebrity breakups and high profile people. And, when you talk about the 1% of the 1%, and if any of that actually gets out and leaked out into the press, then you actually see that there's usually a lot of withholding financially, that they may live in what looks like a luxurious lifestyle, but they actually have zero access.
Look at Britney Spears. Yes, the biggest case we've just had, right?
Exactly.
And she is the perfect case of financial abuse. It's horrendous that she was she's a multimillionaire and couldn't touch it.
Yes, exactly. So, this, like I said, it really, I feel like it leaks into every single household. It really does. And it's really just paying attention to, like, that's your biggest, if there was anything that anyone has learned right now during this time together, is, do you have access? And if you don't, then ask yourself why, and really shine a light on that and find out why don't I have access to my shared finances? What should be shared? Yeah. Yes, you can have separate accounts. Yes, you can have separate finances. Yes, you can have all these things, but really take a look at the reality of where do you have access and where do you not? Where do you, and why?
Okay. So if people who are listening start to, realize that they are in some of these situations, what are some ways that they can start to unravel this?
This is really good, because if I knew these things, I wouldn't have found myself with my bank accounts drained and, really starting from absolutely zero. So keep your personal information safe. So that's your PIN numbers, your access codes, your any of your social security cards, anything like that, especially if you are looking, this is when you want to start to, well, we'll talk about this in a little bit about ways to actually leave, to find the ways to start to plan, because there's a lot that goes into this as well. Do not co-sign alone. If you're able to not co-sign or be in any kind of financial contract, once you're starting to realize, oh, I'm in this, like, try to stop that now. Know the laws of the state that you're in, the financial state. Because for me, see, I didn't realize what was happening, and he had a plan all along. I was with him long enough, 11 years, to where he had actually been starting to plan. Because with this cycle, this honeymoon cycle that we spoke of before, it's like when they start to go into the honeymoon cycle, then while they're in that state of rest, what you think is a state of rest, they're actually going, oh, shoot, in the background, they're starting to do some things that you don't even think about, because you're just walking on eggshells and you're just going, oh, he says he's working on things, or they say this will be different, or, or they're changing a little bit. But the reality is they're starting to, even unconsciously or subconsciously, starting to do things in the background. So what was happening with me is that he had found out what the laws were in our state. And what it was whoever had possession of the things actually have the things. It doesn't matter anything else. And so I was actually the person who left. I left the home, I left the furnishings, I left all the things. And so because he had possession of that, I had no rights to them. So really know the laws in your state or Providence or wherever you are. Know the laws of possessions and finances. If you are thinking, oh my gosh, I might be in this situation, go and get your credit report. There's free credit reports out there. Check your credit report, because that's where you will find if anyone has actually opened up, other lines of credit that you don't even know about. That was something else I found out. Other people were signing for me.
Wow.
Other people were posing as me.
Wow.
Other people that were my friends, or who I thought were friends, were posing as me and going and opening lines of credit. And whenever, I'd also want to say, they're getting charmed too, usually in these situations. And they're saying something like, oh, Lori's not available, she's at work, do you mind just coming with me over here and just signing? I mean, there's stuff. So there's a lot of deceit that actually goes into this. Start saving your money. Just start saving your money if you feel like you're in a situation like this. Start to save your money in whatever ways that may be. There's a lot of different ways. If you're listening to Carrie's podcast, then there's a lot of different ways that you can have your money in different places besides banks.
Yes, you can. And I've never actually thought about it that way, but DeFi would be amazing, because there's no access unless they find your keys, people. There's no access, and they wouldn't even know where to look.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
And also a good old can somewhere hidden in your house with some cash in it is also a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I know many women who've gotten out of a house in that way.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And another thing, that a lot of people don't think about, if this was resonating with you, like anyone who's listening, when we were speaking on the employment and them coming to your place of employment, because that did happen to me quite a bit, know your job rights also in your state. Because if your employer, a lot of times the employers have the right to not allow spouses or anybody onto the premises and onto the property. And a lot of times, if the employers know this is happening, they have an obligation. They have an obligation to keep their employees safe. So that's another thing too. to know your job rights. Oh, and let's say you are, sorry, this goes along with it. So if you are in a situation where you have already left the relationship, but you have to go to court or you have to go and do something, because there's always some things that end up happening with custody cases or anything like that. A lot of times also know your job rights, because a lot of times your employers have to support you in that. They do have to support you in that. And then sometimes it is paid leave. So.
Okay. I feel like that's a lot. I feel like we got through everything. Is there anything else you want to add to this that you feel like needs to be here to sum this up, Miss?
Yes, I do. I want to say one more thing, actually, maybe two more things. Another thing, if you are looking to move away out of the relationship or get away from the relationship, important documents are really important.
Oh yeah.
And that was another thing that I was blindsided with everything. What finally came to a head with me was actually when my children were kidnapped from me. And that's whenever I went, okay, I have to leave. Like, I have to leave. This has to end. And it wasn't in the way that I wanted to at all. So when I actually went to go and get the important documents like birth certificates, social security numbers, all of those things, medical records for my kids, because they were so young, they were gone. He had already planned for that. So everything, all of the important documents, anything like that was already gone. And I actually had to go and reapply for birth certificates and all of that, because that's another thing. If they
more
have
money, more time.
And also if they have these documents, then it shows that, it shows that they're the responsible parent, even though that may not be the case. But it's really important to also have like their social security number, have their social security numbers, all of those things, so that you can just have access to the things that you may not have had access to, or that you were on, but you don't realize you're on. Because how many times again do you realize, when we're talking about these high profile cases or anything like that, the 1% of the 1%, there's so many times that people will say, I owned a baseball team and I didn't even know that. It will come out. So it's important to have their documentation in that way, like even for the mortgage or anything like that. So that's all important. And making copies of that as well, because with my ex-husband, he actually broke into the home and then stole all those documents after I had them. So I actually have made photocopies of everything as well. There's so much, there's layers to this, but it's been so fascinating and so good to actually truly break the patterns as I work with clients, like even the work that you and I did together, like breaking those, like going deep and breaking the ancestral and generational.
It's deep for sure. It's deep for sure. Like you guys, like I said, you guys, if you go back and listen to that episode, you'll hear me start to talk about it, but it was a really big experience so Lori does spiral. We both do spirals, but then after spiral, you can do something called a quantum clear, which is what we were working on. You can only do them after you've been spiraled. And it's an intense thing. It's an intense thing to really own into, and the goods and the bads, right? Like it was kind of fun actually to think like, oh, there are some like, and it is, right? Like when you really sit about these, like every single one of these, there's positives and negatives to all of it. And it took some time. And Lori's coaching. Like, I don't know what's so good about this one, Lori. But we did. And I was like, oh, I can see how that could be a positive thing. But it shifted my life completely. Like doing this work it doesn't matter. Like I said, I don't know one human being on this planet that has not at some point in time been both sides of this. And to really see that and to own that and to work through the patterns that we create, it's so empowering, because all of a sudden you can free yourself from doing that and from allowing people to do that to you ever again. Because you'll see these signs now. And now I see things so like, it's like, oh, I can see things so quickly now. For myself and for others and, my kids, whatever. but it's because we're willing to, and whoever's listening, right? And it might not be, if you're just at the beginning stages of this, like your safety comes first. Like just get out. Just do these tips that Lori has said to you. If you're in financial abuse situations, like take care of yourself. Like that is your step number one of like right now, if you are in an acute period of time in which you are being abused in any way, shape, or form, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, financially, they all come. And physically, did I say physically? Do whatever you can right now to just remove yourself from that. And before that, you know, as Lori has just said, protect yourself, do the things that you need to do. And if you are out of that and you are in a safe place right now, then be willing. And it's really hard too, as a woman, I will say, as a woman who's been abused, to go, how did I create that? How am I still creating that? Because that's where part of our stuff was like, how am I still creating some of these patterns in my life? Yeah. Again, they show up a little differently. They show up differently throughout time and space, but it was like, ooh, I could start to see things that were subtle, but I was like, I'm doing that and he's doing that and we're doing that and the kids, and you can start to see that. And then you can start to break these patterns, and there's a freedom that comes from that. And from that place, from the work I did with my ex, and when we worked through this, I actually had a very rare opportunity to be able to forgive my ex and for him to be able to forgive me. And we are now actually friends, which is very weird, very randomly weird in the world of abuse. And we still push each other's buttons in ways that like you can when you have been together. And from that became a sense of love that I have never been able to experience. And it wasn't because it wasn't because of him. I want to say that, like, regardless. And it was interesting. I was watching actually something interesting this morning, actually, about this, where someone was like, you don't actually need forgiveness from your ex. You actually don't need to forgive your ex. You don't actually need to even forgive the person that you're with on like a, open your mouth, need to speak to them. You need to internally forgive them. And it's through that process, and internally forgive yourself. And it's through that process that we can all of a sudden find a deeper sense of love for ourselves. And I think that the more that we can drop into this place of love for ourselves, this is where we stop these abuse cycles. Period. End of story. Because if you love yourself enough to say, no, I will not. This is like, I deserve better. But you can only say that when you fully, firmly believe it.
Yes.
And maybe you don't believe it right away. Maybe you don't believe it 100% right away. Right? But take that first step, like enough to go, I deserve better, that you walk out the door. I deserve better, that I'm going to go and figure out how to love myself. I deserve better to, Yes.
Yeah. I talked about how I use the fuel, right? I use the fuel for the fire to get out whenever I started realizing some things. And it was actually the financial abuse that actually made me go, oh, I can do this on my own. It was the financial abuse. But once, it's been 17 years now, and it wasn't until the spiral that I started to realize.
Which was only a few years ago, people.
Yeah, the unconscious part. I think my first spiral, that's whenever I really started deconditioning this and releasing the conditioning of the experience. I didn't realize how much of that was in the unconscious, right? And it's so deep. It's in our cells. When we talk about ancestral and generational, it is in our DNA. That's why these things happen. It's in our DNA. But it was when I finally started looking at that cycle and then saying, okay, so where am I abusing? And then really, like, that's hard, people.
It's hard.
That is really hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah, Carrie, you did such a good job whenever you were doing it. Because when you sit there and go, okay, so where
I'll give myself a little pat on the back right here.
Yeah, because your outcome was so incredible and so beautiful. But when it was me looking at that and going, oh, where am I abusing? And at first it was total denial. Oh, I'm not doing that to anybody. Why would I? No, I'm not going to do that to anybody. And then I started realizing the biggest where I was doing it was with myself.
It's horrible. It's horrible. And then basically, but it really truly is perception is projection, right?
Yes.
I mean, like, it is the true epitome of it. Cause I will say the same thing. I agree with you. I was the worst for myself. I still am the worst to myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, whatever's happening in my mind, like now I can pay attention. I'm like, oh, is that what you're thinking? And that's what you're projecting. And that's what you're getting, Carrie.
Yeah.
Oh, who started
And now you
that?
can
Your
shift
mind,
it.
right?
Now
Is
you
that
can
what started
shift
it? Your mind? Or was it actually because they were doing that thing to you? Or is it just because you believe that that's what you deserve? So that's what you attract in your life because that's what you're telling yourself all the time.
Yes.
And the second we can start to turn that damn voice off.
Mhm. Yes. And so then
Right?
that's the beauty of emotional clearing, right? And the work that we do with Spiral and all the things with emotional clearing is releasing that conditioning that has happened clear back way before that relationship ever happened. Right. And sometimes even further than that, where that we don't even have control of because it is in our DNA and it is because of generations. It's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And the outcome that you had with your past relationship was so inspiring on so many levels. And it actually is what inspired this right
It
here,
is.
what we're doing.
It is. It is. Because it's just, and again, I don't say that. I say that because I know I'm a super, 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 super rare. First of all, that it would even have the opportunity to, but second of all, had the crazy ass courage to do what I did.
Well, and that's what I wanted to also point out. Is it rare because you actually had the courage to do that? And how many can actually have the same outcome? Because it was healing on both sides.
Both sides.
Both sides.
For both of us, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And, because again, the abuser and the abused, right?
Mm-hmm.
I definitely ended the relationship. And let's be honest, people, when we are leaving an emotionally abusive relationship, you better believe I did not end it in a way that was pretty and kind. Like I walked out, which is what most women will do, or men.
Yep.
If you've been abused, you're just going to freaking leave because you finally get an opening.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it doesn't feel good for the other person. And I can tell you that the other person on my side, it was one of the worst experiences of the entirety of his life. And I can tell you that he's had a lot of bad experiences. And when he tells you that it's the worst one, I'm like, ooh, right. As I know, nor some of the other really bad things he's had to deal with.
Yeah.
And so I have to also honor that. And when we could talk about it, I was just like, I get that. Can you understand why I did the way I did it? And he's like, yeah, it still sucks, but I forgive you.
So you want to know what's crazy? When you shared that with me, I actually went and I asked my kids. I don't have communication with my ex-husband, but my son actually works for him. And so I went to him and I kind of just asked a few questions, probing around a little bit. And he told me, Mom, he's stuck back in time. He's stuck back to when that happened because he's so hurt of when that happened. And so, and this is also, opening up another hard conversation of really when you can get to a place of healing and forgiveness and it's first of all healing and then understanding the entire situation and why the things happened in the way that they did, and actually looking at the other person. So it's once you're out of the relationship, that's actually probably the next steps really is once you're out of the relationship and you begin your healing process, then it really is, it's not about what happened. It's about what happened to the people that were in that situation, like prior to. And then then understanding all of those things, it's like, it's way deeper than what's happening right now in the moment. And
100%.
So once you're in a safe space, then it's really looking at the deeper healing and the understanding. And then that's when true forgiveness comes through. Yeah. And you were at that place and it's been so beautiful to witness.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. And I just say that to anyone who's listening, like, it's not, none of this is easy work. None of this is like, do we want to go and face our, the hardest parts of our life? None of this is, and I even started the whole conversation this way, right? With love yourself and have compassion, because when we have to face those things that I was like, far out, I did what? I created what? I am doing that. Holy mother trucker. Right? It's a big, I went through a huge, like, remember that few weeks? I mean, I literally, the week that I started talking to my ex and that Lori and I were doing Quantum Clear together, if you ask my family, I walked around like a big freaking daze. It was like, is Carrie on the planet? Nope. No, I'm processing a lot of stuff. I forgive myself. I love myself. I forgive myself. I love a lot of things.
Yes. And there were so many epiphanies. Like, so I remember every time I talked to you, there would be so many epiphanies and so many aha moments. But then that is what brought the freedom.
Right. Because now I can see it, and I can see how I was showing up in that relationship the same way that I show up in this relationship, because I left that relationship and the next day I started dating my husband. That day he moved me out of my house. Right. And I started dating my husband, and we've been together since. And so I didn't necessarily go and break patterns then. So I was still playing out some of the same stuff. And so I'm creating, like I said, on a different level, completely different situations.
Yeah.
But like, I was still creating stuff in my relationship and for myself, and not happy in certain things because I was playing the same role. And I was like, oh, I was giving them my power. It's a very common thing for us to do. Right.
Very
and I
common.
was. And it didn't serve me. And so I was like, oh, how many places do I do that? And really small, subtle places. Because if you all know me, you'd go, Carrie, are you kidding me? Right. And this is how it can look like from the outside. We can look like really powerful people. And on the inside, I was like, oh, wow, look at these places that I'm doing this. This is totally disempowering.
Yeah.
But then I could make changes. And then since then, like, we've had so many shifts and changes in our marriage, in my life, in my business, and so many things, because I was willing to look at those places within myself that I was just like, oh, I'm creating. I created this part of it then, and I created this now. You know?
Yes. Yes. You nailed it. You just nailed it. And that's that, we talk about, any kind of work that we do with Spiral or practitioners in Spiral. And it's like, it's this fast track because it's so advanced. It's so advanced. And you can so you were doing that 5 months ago, and I've seen the shifts and the changes as you've released all of that conditioning, and then the healing. And then, I've literally watched and witnessed the journey in the last 5 months with your relationship growing and the business growing. And it's just so much expansion, and it's done out of this place of love. It's done out of this, and it's a love for self.
Love for self, 100%.
Yeah.
Because we created it. And so I can uncreate it. I can love myself through this. And that's what we started this as. Like, it does not matter where you are on this journey. If you are listening to this, like, if there's one thing that you take away from this, if there's one thing, have compassion and love for yourself. You're just doing, and I say this like I actually hate using that word, but like, you're doing exactly what you were conditioned to do.
Yeah.
And if you were conditioned to do this, you can uncondition yourself from doing this, and you can create freedom no matter where you are, no matter how far at the bottom of a hole you are right now. Or again, like Lori and I said, both of us have been out of these relationships for, I'm 16 years. She's 17 years. Right. This is like many years later down the track that we're doing this work.
Yeah.
Right.
And also people not even knowing the extent of where
you are,
where we were. I mean, just like what you said, people that know me are like, wait, what? Wait, what?
Really?
This happened?
Really?
Wait, what? And then also while I was in it, wait, what?
Right. You would never know.
Yeah. You never know. And you never know what's going on, behind closed doors. And so I hope that this conversation is actually just opened a door, opened awareness, shined a light on even those who are around you, not only yourself, but also those who are around you.
Yes. Okay. We need to wrap this, because I know that we're for sure. I'm sure that we're over an hour. And I don't know why I make that the time frame, but anyway, it is. And I don't think I stick to it very well if you've been listening to this podcast, guys. So is there anything that you want to add to, like, where people could go to get support for this, and then where they can find you?
Yeah. So you can find me at my website, www.lorikinsey, LORIKINSEY.com. I specialize in working with visionary leaders who have experienced domestic violence and are creating great change in their lives and in the lives of others. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that happens whenever you're able to connect with your gifts on a totally different level and able to share those gifts with the world. So that is happening. Also, I actually would like to give you I would like to give you resources, because a lot of these resources. Oh, okay. I just want to tell you one more thing. Go and you can Google any of this stuff, but please, if you are in a situation, ask to use somebody else's phone or computers or anything like that.
Oh, yeah. So they can't trace.
Yes. And or go to a public library or anything like that. You know, when I was in these situations, I actually thought I was very much alone, and you're not alone. There's a lot of resources out there. You can literally Google anywhere in your local area. There are tons of organizations that can help you in so many ways. It's just getting educated. And even that of using somebody else's something, even if you're at work or if you're at a public library, or just ask a friend, hey, can I use your phone real fast, or whatever it is, you're not alone. And there are a ton of resources out there. And it's really just getting the education so that you can get your feet underneath you and start to create a plan.
Awesome. And I will say, I know you do have your favorite organization to donate to, and I forget the name of it right now.
My
for
favorite
domestic violence.
Oh, it's called a Blue Butterfly House. Actually,
oh, that's a different one than I was thinking.
It is different. So there's two. There's actually two.
CERT Ministries, isn't
that? So CERT Ministries is human trafficking, and
okay.
a lot of people find themselves in human trafficking situations because of domestic violence. Okay, so I was a huge human trafficking advocate because I actually hit close to home. One of my son's friends, childhood friends, found herself in a human trafficking situation where she was actually sold for drugs by her friends in Las Vegas. And we were able to find her. And it was CERT Ministries who was able to find her. And so that's certministries.org, I believe, SERT. You can find them on Instagram, Facebook, all the places. They do domestic cases. And then also the Blue Butterfly House is actually here locally to me. And they actually provide a safe place for people for parents or grandparents, anybody to actually transfer. It's a drop-off place for the kids once you are separated, and it's a safe space, because there was a lot of trauma that actually happened while my ex-husband and I were actually dropping off and transferring children, and so if this place was open when this was happening, I would have definitely been using it. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in domestic violence relationships. It doesn't end when you leave, usually. So yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here. We could talk for hours.
We could talk for hours. We do talk for hours, people, by the way. And actually, we're going to talk later tonight.
For hours.
That is true. But thank you for being here and talking about this today. This is such an important conversation. And for those of you who are listening, please share this conversation, take action, because you are not alone. Help other people to get out of these situations. Share this on social media, share this all around, share the videos that are getting clipped of it, share the podcast, share everything that you can, because this is we do not have to do this anymore. We don't.
No.
And it's time that we decide to take a stand, to choose to change the generational patterns. And in order to do that, it is the biggest, greatest motivator that I have, is to look at my children and say, not anymore. I'm going to get teary-eyed, right? Not anymore. This happened to me, and I'm not going to, by God over my body, let these two boys that I am raising be the people that would go and do this again. Right? If you have women, if you have girls, if you have men, teach your boys to be men that are kind. But it starts with you.
Yes.
It starts with you looking at those children and saying, how do I want them to be? And then choosing yourself to do it differently. So if I showed up as a pushover woman who who gave my power away, then I'm just showing to my children that this is how you get to treat a woman. No, it's not. If I say to them that it's okay that you do this, no, it's not. It starts with us.
It does start with us. And back when I said I thought I was breaking the pattern just by leaving, and I wasn't. And actually what we've actually seen happen is that my daughter has actually experienced more trauma than I ever have, and has actually also been the abuser, and she has not only been the survivor and has been in the flee situation where we had to get her out then, but she has also been the offender in that as well. And so that's when I realized, okay, we really do have to look at this, and we really do have to break the pattern. And the pattern is releasing that conditioning from the experiences that we've had, and most of the time as children. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I love you. And I will see you all, everybody who's listening, on the next show.
Okay. All right. I love you.
Love you. Just a quick break from the show to let you in on a new, exciting, and free training for you. You have been asking, and so I am delivering. I am going to be running a free 5-day Intro to Crypto live experience. Do you want to know how to get your first coins in crypto? Has the thought of educating yourself to learn the tech to do this been a stopping point for you? If so, I'm doing a free 5-day Intro to Crypto live training that will show you how to buy your first coins. It's time to stop making excuses. I want to make this as easy as possible for you. Hey, I'm not a tech person and I can do this. And if I can do this, so can you. Not only that, but I'm teaching my 8 and 12-year-old how to do this. So if I can teach them, then I can definitely show you. If this intrigues you, come and join me for free at www.carrienorley.com/crypto intro. Again, that's carrienorley.com/crypto intro. I look forward to seeing you there and celebrating you as you take your first steps into the wonderful world of crypto. And now, back to the show. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you love what you heard, please help us get this message out to more people, because together we rise. Please review it, subscribe to the show, and share on social media. When you share, please tag me. On Insta, I'm at Carrie Norley, and on Facebook, I'm facebook.com/CarrieNorley1, or Carrie Kaplan Norley is my official name there. Please come and connect with me on social media and say hello. I love hearing from my listeners. And thank you so much for your support. I'm so excited to help you bring in the new wealth.